Hi, I'm Harriet Frew, eating disorder therapist, teacher and podcaster, and you're about to start healing from your eating disorder and transforming your life and your relationship with food and body. I've worked in NHS and private practice supporting clients for 20 years, and I believe that recovery is possible for you. This podcast dives into expert interviews, evidence-based psychological approaches, and anecdotal tips from the therapy room from my years of experience. If you're wanting to heal your relationship with food, feel confident in your body, develop self-love and self-acceptance, and create a life of freedom and meaning, then this podcast is for you. Thank you for being here.
So today I have a guest on the show, and I am talking to Ella Matthews-West, founder of Breathe Body Mind. Ella is a West London hypnotherapist specialising in chronic pain, trauma and anxiety. Ella is also a pain neuroscience educator, a Buteyko Breathing Instructor, TRE, Trauma and Tension Release Exercise Provider, a Neuro-Linguistic Programming Master Practitioner, yoga teacher and health coach. Ella has over 20 years experience in helping people overcome chronic pain, eliminate anxiety and manage stress. Originally practicing as a sports massage and myofascial release massage therapist, Ella retrained as a cognitive hypnotherapist in West London out of a deep desire to be able to help people out of pain. In Ella's spare time, she enjoys singing, dancing, reading, being by the sea, swimming, yoga, and growing food. In the episode today, Ella talks about her own journey in pain healing, starting from when her mother was unwell to then dealing with her own spinal injury. Ella then talks us through the different methodologies that she utilises in supporting first herself and now her clients. Ella does a deep dive into the pain neuroscience education. She talks about Buteyko Breathing and TRE, Trauma and Tension Release Exercise. Ella talks about shifting negative self-talk, and we even touch on manifestation, the reticular activating system, and combining spirituality with science. There is so much packed in this episode. I know you're going to love this one. Let's get to the conversation. Hi, Ella. Welcome to the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast.
Thank you so much, Harriet.
Ella, could I firstly get you to introduce yourself to the listeners, please?
Of course. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Ella Matthews. I wear a few different hats, but I am a trained cognitive hypnotherapist. I practice TRE facilitation, which stands for trauma release exercises. I help people learn Buteyko breathing, which is a way of normalizing dysfunctional breathing. I teach pain neuroscience education, and I'm a health coach.
Oh, multi-talented expert, I think, of many different fields there, Ella.
Thank you.
Ella, could you tell us a little bit about your journey? Because I know before we went on air, you were sort of just briefly introduced me to the fact that some of your journey has been led very much by your personal experience.
Absolutely. Yes, I'd love to. So really, it all kind of starts with my mum. My mum got very, very sick about 11 years ago. She was actually sick before then, but we found out she was very sick about 11 years ago. And because of her sickness, I became her carer. And at the time, I felt that I didn't really have enough tools to help her and also to support myself. And it was very, very difficult. And I looked after her for 5 years until she sadly died about 5 years ago now. And then after her death, basically my health just nosedived, and I ended up with a horrible, horrible spinal injury, which I thought at the time was purely mechanically based because I'd fallen down the stairs trying to help her get up the stairs when she was sick. And that sort of led me on this horrible journey to find out what was wrong. And I had x-rays and I had DEXA scans and I had very expensive osteopathy. And the whole time it was just getting worse. And I ended up nearly needing a stick, and I was walking with a limp, and I couldn't even touch my own feet at one point. And my thought process was, I'm never going to get out of pain. This is it now. I'm stuck. I'm going to end up like my mum. What if I need a wheelchair? All the while not realizing that the narrative I was telling myself was keeping me in pain. And once I learned more about how the way you talk to yourself hugely impacts your perception of pain, I was able to get out of pain. And that led me to train specifically around chronic pain, but also the sort of broader picture of just suffering, A lot of people have anxiety related to pain syndromes. A lot of people deal with depression, understandably so. I've kind of used my own lived experience of dealing with my mum who was in pain and then also dealing with my own pain to expand my knowledge of how to help other people and retrained as a therapist. And that's kind of why I'm here now.
Okay, no, well, thank you for sort of talking us through that. And it sounds like a just horrendous time for you. I guess losing your mum and everything I'm sure you went through up until that point, and then yourself dealing with the injury. And it sounds like you felt really desperate and almost resigned to having to live with it for the long term.
Well, that's it. And it's completely understandable when people think like that, because when you're in pain, the word chronic kind of implies that you're stuck with it, right? And I certainly thought I was. There's an understandable catastrophization that happens and the narrative you tell yourself. And also there's a desire to minimize it and push it away and make it go away and make it stop and do anything to make it stop. And actually, the fuel for pain is fear and focus. So when you're scared of it, when you push it away, when you try to change it, when you do anything to make it stop, and when you're continually focusing on it, you're making it worse. And that's a completely unconscious and understandable way of reacting, right? But once you know that, you can do something about it. And once your brain has different inputs, your relationship to those sensations will change. And so I see it as my job and actually my passion to help find those inputs for people now.
Oh, so where do you even begin with that? Because I just think of my own very minute experiences with pain. I think through childbirth, I had a really bad toothache. But, you know, again, all very kind of brief in the bigger picture of things in terms of how much pain I'm sure many other people have experienced and are experiencing. But when you are in the midst of that pain, you do just want to focus on it, don't you? You do. The fear response is very heightened. You are thinking catastrophic thoughts. So how do you begin to interrupt that?
That's a great question. And I think the first thing to understand is that pain is a universal experience. It's something completely natural. We all experience it. In fact, there's a very, very tiny subsection of people who are born without the ability to feel pain. They don't live very long. So actually being able to feel pain, we're lucky because it's a protective gesture. It's your brain's interpretation of how much danger you're in. And sometimes it does its job a bit too well. And that's when things turn chronic. So if you're in acute pain because you've had an injury, for example, that's a sign that you need to go and do something about it because you need to have medical attention. But if it's pain that's persisting, chronic pain is defined as anything lasting over 3 months. Often there's a neuroplastic element, which means your brain has changed in relationship to how it interprets those sensations. So I'd say to you, if you find yourself in a very painful situation, first of all, you need to know if there's any underlying tissue damage, because if so, that's something that requires some attention, right? And hopefully that goes without saying. But actually, there's a very weak correlation between pain and tissue damage. Once tissue damage has been ruled out, then it's time to look at the other indicating factors. And this can be done by pinpointing anything in your life that's causing you stress and anything in your life that's causing you joy, and minimizing or eliminating or changing your relationship to the things that cause you stress and increasing the things that cause you joy. So it sounds simple, but actually everyone's different and it can be very nuanced for the individual. Ultimately, stress hormones make pain worse. So when you start to bring those stress hormones down, your perception of pain decreases.
That's so interesting. Would you say with anyone experiencing chronic pain that they will be having some kind of life stresses going on underneath the surface, even though if they're a bit unconscious? Like, would that almost be happening in all cases?
So, yeah, another good question. I'll give you an example. A lot of people who experience chronic pain have got unprocessed trauma. So even if their life is seemingly brilliant on the outside, they might be holding down a great job and they might have lovely kids and they might live in a nice house. But if they've got unprocessed emotions going on, especially due to anything traumatic, that's going to be fueling that sensation of pain. Another big one that goes overlooked is the way you talk to yourself. If you've got an unkind inner voice, you're creating alarm in your system, and alarm fuels that perception of pain. So even if it seems like you've got it all together, there's little things that go unnoticed that when you highlight them to yourself and when you work on changing it, your relationship to those sensations can hugely change.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. When you're working with different people, like you're using all these different tools, like the Pain Neuroscience Education, the Buteyko Breathing, the trauma and tension release exercises, NLP, health coaching. Can you sort of take us through some of those different elements, I guess, and explain a little bit about how you might work?
Yeah, I'd love to. So often working with me starts with quite a detailed consultation. And the information I gather from that consultation will inform the direction that our work will take. Often people come to me and they know what they want to do, so they'll come to me for hypnotherapy. But it might be that as the work progresses, that they want to try something that often people have never heard of, TRE, for example. Sometimes people come to me for just TRE, and that's a tool that I can teach them that they can take home and use it at home by themselves. Sometimes people want a little bit more time on their journey, a bit of hand holding along the way until they feel they can walk that path by themselves. So really, there isn't a one size fits all approach. I tend to combine elements of each depending on the individual.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? Because I guess every human is slightly individual and experiencing their symptoms in a slightly different way.
Exactly. Everyone's different. And I kind of see it as a jigsaw puzzle. Let's find the bits that are missing, because it might be that you've got your exercise routine completely down. It might be that your self-talk is fantastic, but your breathing is wrong. And if all the positive affirmations in the world aren't going to make you feel better if your breathing is wrong, and that can often go undetected. So for me, it's about finding those missing pieces of the jigsaw puzzle to put it back together.
Yeah, no, sure. So you've already talked a little bit about that kind of whole pain neuroscience, kind of given us a bit of education around that already. Is there anything you'd like to kind of elaborate on that for anyone that's listening?
For sure. There's a really simple, well, I'll try and make it simple, fact that I find really, really, really hopeful when it comes to experiencing pain, which is pain is transmitted via our neurons, via our nerve cells. And we don't actually have any pain receptors in our body. We have alarm receptors, and it's our brain that interprets that alarm into pain. On those neurons, it's kind of like having a door and a hallway. So each neuron is a door, and the hallway in between is the gap in between your neuron. That's called your synaptic gap. Now, those doors on your neurons, they only live for 5 to 6 days, which means the pain that you were experiencing this time last week, those doors, they're gone already. The ones that interpret the pain, because the doors open and close in response to pain signals, right? The doors that were there, the receptors and sensors on your neurons that were there when your pain started, they're long gone, they're dead and gone. We can change those doors if we change the inputs. So every week we have an opportunity to change the way the receptors work, which means that something that's chronic and been going on for a long time doesn't necessarily need to continue going on for a long time. In fact, it can change quite quickly. And that's a really hopeful message for people to understand, that their pain sensations can change quickly when you change the inputs.
Yeah, no, gosh, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And it's quite empowering, I think, even just getting one's head around the fact that actually I can change this. This isn't a permanent thing almost. My body is constantly shifting. Even just embracing that kind of statement, you already feel a bit more empowered, I would think, don't you, to kind of...
Exactly. And, I've had people come to me, really seriously intelligent and open-minded and lovely people who think that the word chronic means that they're stuck with it forever because their knowledge hasn't been expanded enough by their traditional healthcare givers, the doctors and the nurses. And so when you expand that knowledge, it is very empowering. And the thing is, those inputs that I talk about, sometimes that can just be what's going on in between your ears, the way you talk to yourself about your pain, the way you describe it to yourself, how much help you accept from other people. So whether or not you're repressing your feelings and your emotions. And once you understand that, you can begin to have agency over those inputs, and then stuff can change quite quickly.
Sure. So this might be a silly question. I don't really know enough about the brain, but with the reticular activating system, where we kind of like like I've got a red mini. Before I had a red mini, I didn't see red minis. Now I see red minis everywhere. Is that all kind of connected in as well in terms of what you're focused? Yeah.
Yes. That phenomenon, that predictive processing, where, for example, you see a dog, your brain doesn't have to match it to every single animal. Is it a giraffe? Is it an elephant? You know it's a dog, right? Because your brain has already stored what a dog is in there. That's predictive processing, and it's a shortcut so that we don't use up too much energy. But it can work against us when it comes to pain, because if we expect pain, our bodies will continue to produce it because of this predictive processing. But again, it's about knowledge. Once you know that that happens, you can change your expectations. And when you change your expectations, the way you evaluate your sensations can change.
Sure. I know with my own work in therapy with people, when you're trying to sort of support them in shifting their thoughts, it can be quite challenging, isn't it? Because I think with pain, it's a bit like saying like the pink elephant in the room, isn't it? And like, don't think about the pink elephant. And then in a way, all you can think about is the blooming pink elephant, brighter pink than ever. How do you work with that to really help people direct and shift their thoughts in a different direction?
Again, it's a really, really good question. And there isn't a sort of one size fits all answer. Some people, it's about identifying the way that they talk to themselves, like I'd already said before. Some people, it's about using your imagination for you rather than against you. So nothing's going to happen unless you've thought of it first, right? But if your imagination is taking you down a path of, I'm going to end up in a wheelchair, for example, then you're more likely to put yourself on that path, obviously entirely unconsciously, without any blame attached to it whatsoever. If you can imagine a brighter future than that, and you can really imagine yourself being healthy and strong, you've got 3 trillion cells in your body, and they're all listening to you. So when you give them a new messaging, they will respond in kind. And it might not be that you can get back to 100% feeling amazing. It might be that you've never felt 100%. People who are dealing with long-term health conditions, there's no magic wand to get rid of ME, for example, or MS or fibro, but you can do a lot within the limitations of whatever health condition you've got to maximize your health. And I think education's a really big one. Using your imagination for you, not against you, is a big one. And also putting your own emotional needs first. So understanding your emotions, being able to connect them to bodily sensations accurately, and asking yourself, what do I need? What do I need? And there's a bit of a crossover with the eating disorder recovery, in that when you ignore your own needs, for example, you ignore thirst or hunger or the need to go to the loo or the need to sleep, those needs, the way that they're interpreted in your brain, cross over with parts of your brain that are responsible for pain sensations. So if you have unmet needs, you're going to be lighting up those areas of your brain and making your pain worse. So really, it's about understanding yourself and meeting your own needs in a compassionate and kind way, the same that you would do to your children or your friends or your parents.
So would you sometimes work with people that have eating issues alongside their chronic pain? Do you see that very commonly?
I have certainly helped people before who have incredibly low self-body image, and that's caused them to binge and purge or to not eat enough. So yes, there definitely is a crossover there. It's not my specialism. However, it is something that I have an interest in, because obviously that's a form of emotional pain, isn't it? There's always emotional pain connected to eating disorders, and that element of having low self-esteem or low self-confidence and a faulty image of yourself in your mind. The good thing about working with all of this is that your brain is plastic, meaning it has the ability to change. Neuroplasticity means your brain can change with the right inputs. Bioplasticity means your body can change with the right inputs. So again, it comes down to those missing pieces of the puzzle. What inputs does this person need? And then co-creating them with my clients. Yeah.
Oh, no, so interesting. And another, which might be slightly kind of interesting question. Do you view the work you do as well through the more spiritual kind of manifestation lens as well? Or would you, because I know like with manifestation, we can look at it very much more from the sort of scientific viewpoint, can't we? Or we can look at it more through the spiritual. And then there's some people like Dr. Tara Swart, who has kind of combined the two and is starting to sort of show, how much they are one, really. You don't have to be purely science, you have to be purely spiritual. So I just wonder if you had any thoughts on that to share.
Well, everything I do is evidence-based, so I am very, very interested in scientific knowledge. But again, it doesn't have to be either or. And like you said, there's a lot of research coming out now to do with how we create our own reality on a sort of physics level. It's not it's not woo, is it? Everything began with an idea, and your imagination is super, super powerful. And when you harness it for your own good, that's when the magic happens. But it doesn't mean that it's not scientific. And I certainly have a spiritual aspect to the way I sort of carry myself in the world. And there's room within my work. I've helped people who are deeply religious. I've helped people who are completely atheist or agnostic. There's room for all of it. There's room for all of it.
Yeah, I like that. There's room for all of it. I think there really is. There's not one way to all of this, is there?
No. And a lot of people come to me and they've tried Reiki, or they practice Reiki, or maybe they do tarot, or maybe they work with crystals. And if it helps you, then absolutely brilliant. I would never tell someone to not pursue those lines of interest, in the same way that I would never discourage anyone from seeking medication if they needed medication, for example.
Yeah, no, sure. And I guess it's so interesting, isn't it? Because of like what you're talking about earlier and how powerful our thoughts are and what's going to happen in the body. Like, in a way, whatever you think is helping you is probably going to help you if you have a strong enough belief about that, isn't it?
100%. And that is the placebo effect. And that is one of the most amazing things that we can utilize is placebo, because it's our brain's, the medicine cabinet in our brain. We're literally creating that medicine through the power of our own thoughts.
Yeah. Oh, it's such an interesting area. And tell me a bit about the Buteyko breathing and what that's about.
So Buteyko breathing is a way of normalizing dysfunctional breathing using specific exercises. And the principle underlying it is that often people don't have a very high tolerance to carbon dioxide. Now, sounds a bit strange because we think of carbon dioxide as a waste gas that we breathe out, right? But actually, it's a bit more complicated than that, because carbon dioxide helps your body to release the oxygen that's attached to your red blood cells, your hemoglobin. So if you have too low carbon dioxide, your body actually isn't utilizing oxygen well enough, and that can drive symptoms when it comes to asthma or bronchitis or emphysema or any other form of COPD. It can also drive anxiety. It can be a missing link in anxiety. So hyperventilation, which is simply breathing too shallow, too fast, that can become chronic. And so you kind of get stuck with this upper chest breathing very quickly pattern. And that can drive insomnia, that can drive anxiety. It keeps your body in a state of fight or flight. So once you understand that, you can, again, because of bioplasticity, you can change it. This can all be changed. And when you do that, your body then regains the ability to be in a state of balance. And that will be reflected in symptom reduction, but also in being able to keep calm under stress, being able to sleep better. And obviously that then has a knock-on effect to health as well.
Sure. And are those sort of techniques things that people can learn quite easily?
Yeah, they're super simple. So they're graded and progressive, meaning it starts off easy and then it gets a bit harder as your abilities to control your breath increase. And you can teach them yourself, but doing it with a teacher means that you are being held accountable and it's on a level that is always within your reach, within your abilities. So you're not sort of overwhelming yourself and doing too much or too little, because there needs to be a kind of sweet spot of just about the right amount of challenging.
Yeah, no, sure. And is that something that you would maybe just like use yourself sometimes as part of your overall self-care package or not?
So I do practice slow breathing habitually because I find that it really does keep on top of my tendency to be anxious, because everyone experiences anxiety and I was certainly a very anxious child. And I do feel that that's something that helps me on a daily basis now. However, I don't tend to do the sort of specific Buteyko exercises because I actually don't need them. I'm not symptomatic in any way. I don't have asthma. And really, it's about breathing through your nose. A lot of the time, people breathe through their mouths without realizing, and that can really drive dysfunctional breathing. So if you breathe through your nose habitually, even when you're, for example, running, your breathing probably pretty functional, but it occurs on a spectrum of function to dysfunction. And Buteyko breathing helps to pinpoint where on that spectrum you are and then shift your breathing to a state of effortlessness, basically. So if you have effortful breathing, if you find yourself out of breath easily, there's probably something that needs tuning up there.
Right. And then what about the TRE, the trauma and tension release exercises? Could you just give us a little introduction to that?
I'd love to. It was designed by a guy called David Berceli, and it's a way of eliciting the body's natural tremor response in order to increase your window of tolerance, meaning your ability to withhandle stress and come back to a state of balance in your nervous system. So it's a bit like weightlifting for your nervous system. You're increasing the resilience to any forms of stressor each time you do it. And it's very basic level. I don't know if you've ever seen, like, say you go to the park and you see a couple of ducks on the pond and they get into a bit of a fight and they're squawking and wings are flapping and the feathers are flying, and then they swim off and then they just do a little shake. And then the ducks never think about that fight ever again. And that little shake that they've just done, that's a sort of duck version of TRE, right? But humans don't do that because it's not really appropriate to sort of run away from what's going on and then stand in the corner and shaking. So we store it all up in our nervous systems instead and then wonder why we can't sleep at night. So it's a way of resetting your nervous system through intentional and invited shaking.
Okay. So, and can it be as well, like, I'm sure I've watched something on YouTube about where people like speak in gobbledygook, kind of like will literally spend, like, be moving their body in all kinds of weird, I don't know, doing lots of weird movement, sort of shaking it all out, but also sometimes as well then kind of speaking in gobbledygook with their voice, and that kind of like clearing the subconscious. Is that something that you've heard of?
That sounds like some sort of somatic release technique. And I know there's a lot of somatic release techniques available now. TRE isn't specifically that because it's done in a way that you don't actually need to speak. It's not a talking therapy. It's more of a nervous system reset. But no, that sounds interesting. And whatever works for people, if people find that's a release, then fantastic. It's very important, however, to consider not being overwhelmed, because you want to avoid overwhelm. You want to feel safe. You want to do it in an environment of safety. Otherwise, it's not therapeutic. So some of these sort of trendy somatic release things can be too much. It needs to be done in a way where you feel contained.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, isn't it? Because actually feeling safe in relationship, having that kind of containment is a whole different experience to sort of doing it like randomly in your day when you're on your own in your bedroom. I don't know.
Yeah, very much so. And the thing is, TRE, you can do it by yourself once you've got the skills and safety to do so. And it's nothing without that safety. But when it's done in an environment of safety, it becomes a corrective experience. So it's all about retraining your nervous system to be able to thrive in the presence of stress, because we all have stress, right? It's a inescapable fact of life. In fact, if we didn't have stress, life would be pretty rubbish, and also we wouldn't have the ability to grow and thrive. So when you increase your capacity to stress, your life generally gets better.
Sure. So again, is that something that you would use in your life now? If you have a particularly like stressful day or something like surprising out of the blue, is that something that you might do? Really kind of use that kind of, release?
Yeah, I try to do it twice a week, even if I haven't had a stressful day, because each time you do it, you're increasing your window of tolerance, and you find that the stressful day becomes less stressful once you've done TRE and it's become a bit of a habit, because you're better able to cope with stuff. And it's really fantastic tool, and I'm really passionate about spreading the information on it because it's not very well known about yet.
Okay, no, fantastic. Okay, well, I think, Ellie, you've covered just so many interesting aspects to the work you do. I mean, is there anything that you'd like to add to everything that you've said? Because I'm sure you could probably talk for hours, but is there anything that's perhaps really crucial that you would like to mention in this conversation?
I think really being able to pinpoint what you need is really important, and then being able to meet your needs and ask for help if you need to. And knowing that if you have an unkind inner voice, that can be changed and you're not stuck with it. And whatever's going on in your life that's causing you pain, you're not stuck with it. Your brain can change, your body can change at any time and at any age. It's just about finding those missing pieces of that jigsaw puzzle.
Oh, well, that's a really hopeful message to end on. And Ella, where can people find you if they want to get in touch, find out more about the work you do?
Sure. So my website address is breathbodymind.co.uk. And I have a very small Instagram page, which I'd like to be a bit more active on, which is breath_body_mind. So Breath Body Mind is my business name. You can get on my mailing list on my website. You can follow me on Instagram or Facebook. And yeah, I'd be more than happy to chat to anyone who is interested. I offer a 30-minute free phone conversation if anyone wants to know anything a bit more detail or a bit more about how I work and what I do.
Okay, well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Ella. That was just such an inspiring conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot. And I just sort of think about some of my own clients and people in my own life that are going to get so much value from this conversation. Never mind all the other listeners as well. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time out and sharing this with us all.
I really, really appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much, Harriet. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Thank you.
So I hope you enjoyed this conversation just as much as I did, and do go and check out all of Ella's details in the show notes. If you're not following me already, do seek me out on Instagram at the Eating Disorder Therapist _ For further support with your relationship with food, do go to the eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk. If you enjoy this podcast, I would be so grateful if you'd follow, rate and review, as it helps it reach so many more listeners. Thank you so much for listening today, and I look forward to sharing another podcast episode with you very soon.